The message arrived on a Tuesday. It came not as a radio signal or light beam, but through a strange ripple in space that appeared just beyond the moon. Scientists around the world rushed to their instruments. Politicians gathered in emergency meetings, and regular people looked up at the night sky wondering what it meant. Olivia Winters was drinking her morning coffee when her phone buzzed with the highest priority alert she had ever received. As commander of Earth's newly formed First Contact Division, she had spent years preparing for this moment. She grabbed her go bag and was in a helicopter within 20 minutes. The signal contains mathematical sequences, followed by what appears to be an invitation, said General Howard as they rushed through the underground halls of the Global Space Command. They call themselves the Zrith. They want to meet. Olivia nodded, her mind already racing through protocols. Have we assembled the team? Dr. Greg Summers arrived an hour ago. The linguists and other specialists will be here by evening. Greg. Summers was exactly where Olivia expected to find him, hunched over a screen, his curly hair a mess, eyes wide with excitement. As Earth's leading expert in comparative biology with a special focus on arachnids, he wasn't the obvious choice for first contact. But the world's governments had decided that understanding alien biology would be crucial. Commander Winters. Greg jumped up, knocking over an empty coffee cup. Can you believe it? Actual aliens. I have so many questions about their evolutionary path. Olivia smiled despite the pressure. Save those questions, Greg. We need to prepare for the meeting. Over the next 72 hours, Earth prepared. The Zrith had requested a meeting in orbit around Earth, and humanity rushed to ready the ESV Horizon, their newest space vessel, for the historic encounter. On the day of the meeting, Olivia stood at the Horizon's viewing window, watching as a shimmering craft 3 times their size appeared from nowhere. It was angular and dark, covered in what looked like overlapping plates. Just like an exoskeleton, Greg whispered beside her, clutching his tablet. The first image of the Zrith came through on their screens. Tall beings with natural armor covering their bodies. They stood at least 8 feet tall, with 4 arms, and a head that seemed to meld directly into their torso. Their eyes were compound, like those of insects, but glowed with an intelligence that was unmistakable. Greetings, inhabitants of Earth. The translation came through clearly, though the Zrith's mouth parts moved in complex patterns. We are pleased to establish contact with your developing world. The tone wasn't lost on Olivia. Developing. She glanced at her team, signaling them to maintain their composure. We welcome you to our solar system, Olivia replied. We are honored to represent Earth and humanity in this historic meeting. The Zrith representatives boarded the Horizon through an airlock designed to accommodate their larger frames. Up close, they were even more impressive. Their exoskeletons clicked softly as they moved, and Olivia noticed that what they had thought were decorations were actually weapons built into their armor. I am Krazotz, primary diplomat of the Zrith Collective, said the tallest one. We have observed your world for some time. You are young, but show promise. The condescension was obvious, but Olivia maintained her diplomatic smile. We have much to learn, certainly, but we also have much to share. The meeting proceeded with introductions and basic information exchange. The Zrith made little effort to hide their superior attitude. When Greg presented information about Earth's biodiversity, the aliens seemed almost amused. Your wildlife is interesting, Krazotz said, examining images of Earth's creatures, though rather fragile. Appearance can be deceiving, Greg said, his passion for Earth's creatures overtaking his nervousness. Many of our smallest species are actually quite formidable. The Zrith diplomat made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Formidable? These tiny things? He pointed at an image of a jumping spider. On our world, only the largest and strongest survive. It is the natural order. Olivia watched this exchange with growing concern. The Zrith clearly valued size and physical prowess. This could complicate diplomatic relations. We would like to invite a delegation from Earth to visit our homeworld, Krazotz announced. There, The Zrith High Council can formally classify your civilization and determine appropriate relationships. Classify? Olivia asked. Yes. All species are categorized according to their evolutionary development and capabilities. This determines trade rights, territorial boundaries, and protections within the galactic community. Greg leaned toward Olivia. They're going to judge our entire species, he whispered. Olivia nodded slightly. We would be honored to visit your world, she told Krazatz. When would this visit take place? Our ship can transport your delegation immediately. The journey will take 14 of your Earth days. The next few hours were a flurry of activity. A team of 12 was selected, Olivia as leader, Greg as scientific advisor, Lieutenant Ben Crawford for security, communications specialists, engineers, and Sam Miller, a junior science officer with expertise in xenobiology. As they prepared to board the Zrith vessel, Greg insisted on bringing biological specimens for exchange. It's customary in scientific circles, he explained to Olivia. And I want them to understand Earth's evolutionary path better. Fine, but nothing dangerous, Olivia said. Greg carefully packed preserved specimens of various Earth creatures. Olivia noticed him paying special attention to a small display containing a preserved jumping spider. Is that really necessary? She asked. Greg nodded firmly. They need to understand that on Earth, evolutionary success isn't just about being the biggest. The Zrith ship was even more impressive inside. The ceilings towered above them, and everything seemed built for beings much larger than humans. Their quarters, though comfortable, made them feel like children. During meals, the Zrith continued to discuss Earth's limitations. They seemed particularly fixated on humanity's physical weakness compared to their own species. Your animals are similarly limited, Krazatz told them during one such conversation. We have analyzed your biological records. Even your most dangerous predators would pose no threat to a Zrith child. Greg's face reddened. With respect, that's not accurate. Size isn't everything in evolutionary terms. Show me one of your Earth. Creatures that could harm a Zrith, Krazatz challenged. Greg opened his case and carefully removed the preserved jumping spider. This spider's relatives, particularly the Sydney funnel-web spider, produce venom that attacks the nervous system. Size has nothing to do with deadliness. The Zrith translator examined the tiny preserved arachnid and made that laughing sound again. Amusing. But venom would need to penetrate our armor, which is impossible for such a tiny creature. Olivia noticed how Greg's fingers tightened around the display case. She placed a calming hand on his arm. Perhaps we have different evolutionary advantages, she suggested diplomatically. As the ship approached the Zrith homeworld, tension grew among the human delegation. They were about to be classified by an advanced alien species, and it seemed their physical attributes would count against them. We need to make them understand, Greg told Olivia, as they looked out at the approaching planet. Earth's strength isn't in our size or armor. It's in our diversity, our adaptability. Olivia nodded. Let's hope we get the chance to prove that. The planet grew larger in the viewing ports, a massive world with sprawling cities visible even from orbit. The humans gathered their belongings, preparing to step onto an alien world for the first time in human history. None of them, not even Greg, could have predicted how a tiny Earth creature would soon change humanity's standing in the galaxy forever. The Zrith homeworld was like nothing the humans had ever seen. Buildings taller than Earth's highest mountains stretched into the orange-tinted sky. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, making the humans feel heavy and slow compared to the Zrith, who moved with easy grace despite their massive size. Welcome to Zrithia Prime, Krazatz announced as the human delegation stepped onto the landing platform, center of the 12 systems and home to the mightiest species in this sector of the galaxy. Olivia nodded politely while exchanging glances with Greg. The Zrith certainly didn't hide their pride. We are honored to be the first humans to visit your world, she said, trying to ignore the ache already building in her legs from the stronger gravity. A group of even larger Zrith approached, their armor more elaborate than Krazatz's. They clicked and hummed in their native language before the translator picked up. These are members of the High Council, Krazatz explained. They will oversee your classification ceremony tomorrow. The humans were escorted to a structure that seemed small by Zrith standards, but was still enormous to human eyes. Inside, their quarters were clearly adapted in a rush for smaller beings. The furniture was too large, the ceilings unnecessarily high, making Olivia feel like a child in an adult's world. "They're making a point," Lieutenant Ben Crawford muttered as he checked the security of their rooms. "Everything here is designed to remind us how small we are." Greg was unpacking his scientific equipment, carefully checking that his specimens had survived the journey. "Size bias is a fascinating psychological phenomenon," he said. "On Earth, we often underestimate small creatures too." Sam Miller, the junior science officer, helped Greg organize the biological samples. "Do you really think these will impress them?" he asked, looking doubtfully at the preserved specimens. "Probably not," Greg admitted. "But they should at least understand that Earth's evolutionary path favored diversity over sheer size." That evening, the humans were invited to a formal reception. The hall was filled with Zrith dignitaries, all towering over the human guests. The walls displayed massive holograms of what appeared to be Zrith warriors battling enormous creatures. "Our greatest heroes," a Zrith official explained, noting Olivia's interest in the images. "Those who have defeated the most dangerous predators of our world." Olivia looked more closely at the creatures being fought. Each one was massive, armored, and resembled the Zrith themselves in basic structure. "Do all predators on your world look similar to your species?" she asked. The Zrith seemed surprised by the question. "Of course. The strong survive and evolve. The weak perish. This is the natural order." Greg joined the conversation, unable to contain his scientific curiosity. "On our world, predators come in all sizes and forms. Some of our deadliest hunters are quite small." The Zrith official made that now familiar sound of dismissal. "A primitive system. True evolutionary success produces dominant forms like ours." The next morning, the humans were led to the Grand Assembly, an enormous circular chamber where hundreds of Zrith were already gathered. At the center was a raised platform where 7 particularly large Zrith sat in ornate chairs. "The High Council," Krazotz explained. "They will evaluate your species today." The ceremony began with a display of Zrith achievements, conquests of other worlds, technological advancements, and exhibitions of physical prowess. Warriors demonstrated combat techniques that showcased their incredible strength and speed. Then came Earth's evaluation. Images of humans appeared on large screens alongside data about Earth's gravity, atmosphere, and biology. The council members clicked and hummed among themselves. The tallest council member, wearing armor adorned with glowing symbols, rose to speak. "I am Supreme Leader Vraxthul. We have studied your world and species with interest. You have achieved space travel despite your physical limitations, which shows promise. However, you are clearly in need of protection and guidance." Olivia stepped forward. "With respect, Supreme Leader, humanity has overcome many challenges through innovation and adaptation." Vraxthul waved a dismissive hand. "Yes, necessity born of weakness. We have seen this pattern before. Based on our evaluation, Earth will be classified as a Category 4 civilization." Greg leaned toward Olivia. "What does that mean?" he whispered. Krazotz answered, not bothering to lower his voice. "Category 4 denotes a developing world with limited potential. You will receive protection from more aggressive species, but have restricted trading rights and no voting powers in the Galactic Assembly." Olivia felt her face flush with anger but maintained her diplomatic composure. "May I ask what criteria were used for this classification? Physical capability, evolutionary advancement, territorial dominance, and predatory status?" Vraxthul answered. "Your species fails to impress in all categories. Your planet has no apex predators of note." Greg could no longer contain himself. "That's simply incorrect. Earth has numerous apex predators." The council members made sounds that the translator interpreted as laughter. "Show us," Vraxthul challenged. "Show us one Earth creature that would concern a Zrith." Greg stepped forward and activated his tablet, projecting images of Earth's predators: lions, great white sharks, Komodo dragons. The Zrith remained unimpressed. Small, weak, no natural armor. they commented. Size isn't everything, Greg insisted. What about our venomous species? He displayed images of snakes, scorpions, and finally, spiders. The Sydney funnel web spider can kill a human in 15 minutes, Greg explained. Its venom attacks the nervous system. Vraxthol leaned forward, examining the image with his compound eyes. And you consider this tiny thing dangerous? Its fangs could not penetrate even the weakest point of our exoskeletons. The council chamber filled with the clicking sounds of Zrith amusement. You misunderstand, Greg tried again. Earth's evolutionary strategy produced diversity, not just size. Our planet has millions of species, each adapted to its own niche. A primitive approach, another council member stated. True evolutionary success results in dominance, not fragmentation. The classification was formalized with a ceremony that felt humiliating to the human delegation. They were presented with a treaty that would place Earth under Zrith protection, which Olivia understood really meant control. We'll need time to review this document, she said firmly. Vraxthul nodded. Of course, but understand that refusing Zrith protection is unwise for a Category 4 world. There are many less benevolent species who would exploit your weaknesses. As they left the council chamber, Ben moved close to Olivia. They're essentially offering us a choice between becoming their pets or their prey, he muttered. Olivia nodded grimly. We need to change their perception of Earth, and quickly. Back in their quarters, the human delegation gathered to discuss their options. Greg paced the oversized room, his scientific mind racing. They have a completely different evolutionary history, he explained. Their world seems to have favored only large predators, all competing against each other. They have no concept of the evolutionary advantages of being small. How does that help us? Sam asked, fidgeting with one of the specimen containers. Greg stopped pacing, a determined look on his face. If we can't tell them, maybe we need to show them. Olivia caught his meaning immediately. Greg, whatever you're thinking, be careful. We can't afford any incidents. Little did any of them know that an incident was already in motion, as Sam's fidgeting had accidentally loosened the seal on one of the specimen containers, the one containing a live Sydney funnel web spider that Greg had brought for study rather than display. The tiny arachnid quietly slipped out unnoticed by anyone and disappeared into a ventilation duct. Sam Miller noticed the empty container an hour later. His heart nearly stopped when he realized what had happened. Dr. Summers, he called out, his voice cracking. We have a problem. Greg rushed over and stared at the open specimen case. His face went pale. Please tell me that's not what I think it is, he said quietly. Sam nodded, unable to speak. What's wrong? Olivia asked, joining them. Greg took a deep breath. The Sydney funnel web spider, it's gone. Gone? What do you mean, gone? Olivia asked, her voice sharp. I brought a live specimen for study, Greg admitted. It must have escaped when we were unpacking. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment. You brought a deadly spider to an alien planet? After I specifically said nothing dangerous? It was secured in a special container, Greg explained. I wanted to run tests on how its venom reacted to alien biology. For science. Ben joined them, his security training kicking in. How dangerous is this thing really? On Earth, its bite can kill a human in 15 minutes without treatment, Greg said. But the Zrith are right about one thing. Its fangs probably can't penetrate their exoskeletons. Unless what? Olivia demanded. Unless it finds a vulnerable spot. Joints, connection points between armor plates may be their eyes. Greg ran his hands through his hair. We need to find it, now. The humans searched their quarters carefully, but found no sign of the spider. Olivia made a difficult decision. We have to tell the Zrith, she said. We can't risk an incident. They already think we're primitive, Ben argued. If we tell them we lost a tiny spider, they'll laugh at us even more. And if that spider bites someone? Olivia countered. What, then? Before they could decide, Krazats arrived to escort them to another meeting with the High Council. The Supreme Leader wishes to discuss your protection treaty, he announced. Olivia exchanged worried glances with her team. We should tell him about the spider, she whispered to Greg. Greg nodded reluctantly. You're right. But let me explain. It's scientifically. I don't want them to think we did this deliberately. As they walked through the massive corridors of the Zrith Central Government Building, Sam lagged behind, guilt-ridden over his mistake. He scanned every corner and crevice, hoping to spot the escaped arachnid. Unknown to any of them, the spider had already traveled far through the building's ventilation system. The ducts, designed for the Zrith's different atmospheric preferences, created perfect highways for the small creature. It moved quickly, sensing air currents and vibrations, hunting for a safe, dark place to hide. The ventilation duct it followed happened to lead directly to the private chamber of Supreme Leader Vraxthul. In this room, Vraxthul was meeting with his 3 most trusted advisors. They discussed the humans and their unexpected resistance to accepting Category 4 status. They are prideful, despite their weakness, one advisor noted. Perhaps we should demonstrate our power more clearly. Vraxthul clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Not yet. Earth has resources we desire. Better to have them cooperate willingly. The spider, sensing the vibrations of movement, crept along the edge of a vent cover. It was stressed and defensive after its journey through the strange environment. The treaty signing will proceed tomorrow, Vraxthul declared. I have modified the terms to give us direct access to their wildlife samples. Their venoms may have medicinal applications, even if the creatures themselves are pathetic. He raised his hand to emphasize his point, accidentally disturbing the vent cover. The small metal grate shifted slightly. The spider, startled by the sudden movement above, dropped silently from the vent. It landed directly on Vraxthul's shoulder joint, where his natural armor was thinnest to allow movement. Vraxthul felt something tickle his shoulder and casually swiped at it with one of his lower arms. It was the worst possible response. The spider, following its defensive instincts when touched, bit down hard with its fangs. They slipped perfectly into the narrow gap in the Zrith's armor, injecting venom directly into the tissue beneath. At first, Vraxthul barely noticed. He continued speaking about the treaty terms, but within seconds his speech began to slur. Supreme Leader? One advisor asked, noticing the change. Vraxthul tried to respond but found his mouth parts wouldn't move properly. A burning sensation spread from his shoulder throughout his body. His forearms began to twitch uncontrollably. Something is wrong, he managed to say before collapsing onto the floor. His compound eyes bulged, and foam appeared at his mouth parts. The advisors jumped to their feet shouting for help. The spider, having delivered its bite, scurried away into a dark corner. Security alarms blared throughout the building. Zrith guards rushed toward the Supreme Leader's chambers. In the corridor, Olivia and her team heard the commotion. What's happening? She asked Krazotz. The diplomat received a message through his communicator and froze in shock. The Supreme Leader has collapsed, he said. He is dying. Greg felt a chill run down his spine. When did this happen? How? Just now. No cause is apparent, Krazotz replied, his translator struggling to convey his distress. We must return. To your quarters immediately. They were quickly surrounded by Zrith guards and marched back to their rooms. The guards' posture was threatening, their weapons ready. What is going on? Olivia demanded once they were inside. Krazotz's compound, eyes fixed on them accusingly. The Supreme Leader was perfectly healthy. Then he suddenly collapsed after meeting with you humans earlier. His nervous system is failing rapidly. Greg's face paled. Nervous system failing? How exactly? Paralysis, respiratory distress, convulsions. Krazotz listed. No Zrith disease acts so quickly. Greg and Olivia exchanged horrified looks. It's the spider, Greg whispered. Those are classic symptoms of funnel web venom. Krazotz heard this. What spider? What have you done? Before Greg could explain, a senior Zrith military officer entered the room. His armor was decorated with symbols of rank, and his posture radiated fury. You are all under arrest for the attempted assassination of Supreme Leader Vraxthul, he announced. Our medical team has detected an unknown toxin in his system, a toxin that is not native to our world. We didn't do this deliberately, Olivia began, but was cut off. Silence. You brought a biological weapon to our planet. This is an act of war. Greg stepped forward. It's not a weapon, it's a spider, a small arachnid from Earth that escaped. Accidentally. I can help treat him if you'll let me. The military officer stared at Greg with his compound eyes. You expect me to believe that a tiny creature from your world could fell the supreme leader of the Zrith in seconds? When not even. Our deadliest predators could penetrate his armor? That's exactly what happened, Greg insisted. And if you want to save him, you need to listen to me now. Every second counts. The officer hesitated, clearly torn between suspicion and the desperate need to save his leader. Take him to the medical facility, he finally ordered. The rest of you will remain here under guard. As Greg was escorted out, Olivia called after him. Save the Supreme Leader, Greg. Our lives depend on it. Ben moved closer to Olivia and Sam. If that spider killed their leader, he said quietly, what do you think they'll do to Earth? Outside, the sound of Zrith warships powering up could be heard even through the thick walls of their quarters. Greg was rushed through the massive halls of the Zrith medical facility. All around him, alien medical staff moved with urgent purpose. Their normally steady movements were now quick and panicked. The Supreme Leader lay on a large medical platform, his massive body twitching violently. Foam still leaked from his mouthparts and his breathing came in irregular gasps. A dozen Zrith medical workers surrounded him, attaching monitoring devices and injecting various substances into his body. Nothing is working, the head medical officer explained, her translator making her voice sound sharp with worry. His nervous system is shutting down. We have never seen anything like this. Greg examined the Supreme Leader carefully. I need to see the bite site. The medical team hesitated, but the military officer who had escorted Greg nodded grimly. They turned Vraxthul's massive body to reveal his shoulder joint. There, barely visible, were two tiny puncture marks surrounded by swollen, discolored tissue. Those are spider fang marks, Greg confirmed. The venom is a neurotoxin. It attacks the nervous system directly. How can such a small creature produce such a powerful poison? A Zrith scientist asked, disbelief clear in his translated voice. On Earth, size doesn't determine deadliness, Greg explained as he worked. Some of our smallest creatures evolved the most potent venoms precisely because they're small and need powerful defenses. Greg turned to the head medical officer. I need access to my equipment from our quarters. I have anti-venom research materials and can synthesize a treatment, but I need those supplies. The military officer barked orders into his communicator. Within minutes, Sam arrived under guard carrying Greg's research case. I brought everything, Sam said, his voice shaking. Olivia said to tell you Earth's delegation is now officially being held as prisoners of war. Greg's stomach dropped, but he forced himself to focus on the immediate problem. We'll deal with that after we save the Supreme Leader. Greg and Sam worked together, using the Zrith's advanced medical equipment along with their own supplies to analyze the venom and develop a treatment. The Zrith biology is different from ours, Greg explained to the increasingly impatient military officer. I need to modify the anti-venom formula to work with his system. Work faster, the officer growled. Our fleet has already been mobilized. If he dies, your planet will face consequences. Greg tried to stay calm despite the pressure. This venom specifically attacks nerve cells. The Zrith have never encountered it before, so they have no natural defenses against it. The head medical officer looked at her readings. His vital signs are dropping. We have perhaps 30 minutes before permanent damage occurs. Sam, who had been quiet while assisting Greg, suddenly spoke up. Doctor, what if we use their medical nanites to deliver the antivenom directly to the affected nervous tissue? Greg looked at the young officer with newfound respect. That's brilliant, Sam. They worked quickly, programming the Zrith medical nanites to deliver their modified antivenom. As they prepared the treatment, Ben's voice came through on Sam's communicator. Sam, we've got another problem, Ben said quietly. The Zrith are intercepting emergency signals from Earth. Their fleet is already positioning for attack. Olivia is trying to negotiate, but they're not listening. Tell her we're close to a treatment, Sam replied. Just need a little more time. Meanwhile, in the holding area, Olivia faced the Zrith High Commander. His massive form loomed over her, but she stood her ground. This was not an act of war, she insisted. It was an accident. The spider escaped from its container without our knowledge. A convenient excuse, the commander replied. Your primitive world sends a delegation that just happens to bring a deadly creature that just happens to attack our supreme leader. Why would we do that? Olivia argued. Olivia. It makes no sense. We're vastly outnumbered and outgunned. An assassination attempt would be suicide. Before the commander could respond, Lieutenant Ben Crawford stepped forward. If I may, I believe I can prove it was an accident. All eyes turned to him. How? The commander demanded. Let me search for the spider, Ben said. If I can capture it alive, it would prove this was not a planned attack. The commander considered this. And why would you be able to find this creature when my soldiers cannot? Because I understand how it thinks and where it would hide, Ben explained. I grew up in Australia, where these spiders are native. I've dealt with them before. It wasn't entirely true. Ben had only seen such spiders in zoos, but he hoped his confidence would convince the Zrith. After a moment, the commander nodded. Very well, but you will be accompanied by guards. Back in the medical facility, Greg and Sam had finished preparing the treatment. The Zrith medical staff looked doubtful as they examined the small vial of modified antivenom. This tiny amount will save him? One asked skeptically. Size isn't everything, Greg replied, unable to hide the irony in his voice. This should counteract the venom and allow his body to recover. As the medical team administered the treatment, Greg and Sam watched anxiously. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to change. The Supreme Leader continued to twitch and gasp. Then gradually his breathing began to steady. The twitching slowed and finally stopped. It's working, the head medical officer announced, her voice filled with surprise. His neural readings are stabilizing. Greg released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The anti-venom is neutralizing the toxin. He'll still need time to recover completely, but the immediate danger has passed. The military officer studied Greg with his compound eyes. You saved him with Earth medicine? Yes, Greg nodded. Ironically, because we've dealt with these venoms for centuries, we know how to counter them. Across the building, Ben was led through maintenance corridors by Zrith guards. He scanned every dark corner and crevice carefully. If I were a funnel web spider in a strange environment, where would I go? He muttered to himself. Ben knew that these spiders preferred dark, moist environments. The Zrith planet was drier than Earth, so the spider would seek out humidity. He directed the search toward water sources. Near a maintenance area with water pipes, Ben slowed down. Check there, he said, pointing to a dark corner where condensation had formed. The guards extended scanning devices but found nothing. Ben crouched down, ignoring the guards' warnings to stay back. He spotted a tiny movement, almost imperceptible behind a pipe joint. There it is, he said quietly. From his pocket, he removed an empty sample container he had taken from their quarters. Moving with careful precision, Ben positioned the container and used a small tool to gently guide the spider inside. It moved quickly, but Ben managed to secure the lid before it could escape again. Got it, he announced, holding up the container where the small black spider now sat, its legs drawn up defensively. The guards stared in disbelief at the tiny creature. One of them leaned closer to examine it. Careful, Ben warned. This little one has already proven what it can do. The guard pulled back quickly. Back in the medical facility, the Supreme Leader had regained consciousness. Though weak, he was alert enough to listen as Greg explained what had happened. A single bite from this Earth creature nearly killed me? Braxthol asked, his voice faint through the translator. Yes, Greg confirmed. The Sydney funnel web spider, one of many venomous species from our world. The Supreme Leader's compound eyes studied Greg with new intensity. And there are more such creatures on your planet? Hundreds of species with deadly venom. Greg nodded. Spiders, snakes, fish, even small blue-ringed octopuses that can kill with a nearly invisible bite. Before Vraxthul could respond, the doors opened. Ben entered, flanked by guards holding the spider container. Behind them came Olivia and the High Commander. "Supreme Leader," the commander said with relief. "You are recovering." "Thanks to the humans' knowledge," Vraxthul replied. He pointed at the container in Ben's hands. "Is that the creature?" Ben nodded and carefully placed the container where the Supreme Leader could see it. Inside, the small spider moved about, its 8 legs testing the walls of its prison. "This?" Vraxthul stared at the creature in disbelief. "This tiny thing nearly ended my life?" Greg stepped forward. "This is what we were trying to explain, Supreme Leader. On Earth, evolutionary success took many forms. Some creatures became large and powerful, like the Zrith. Others became small, but developed potent defenses like venoms that can kill creatures thousands of times their size." The Supreme Leader was silent for a long moment, his compound eyes fixed on the spider. "Perhaps," he finally said, "we have more to learn from Earth than we realized." 3 days later, Supreme Leader Vraxthul called for a special meeting of the High Council. Though still weakened from his near-death experience, he insisted on personally leading this session. The Zrith warships that had been preparing to attack Earth were ordered to stand down but remained in position as a precaution. The human delegation entered the Grand Council chamber. Unlike their first visit, they were now treated with careful respect. Zrith officials kept a noticeable distance from them, eyeing their hands and pockets as if expecting more tiny killers to emerge. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," Vraxthul greeted them from his elevated seat. His voice through the translator sounded different, less condescending, more thoughtful. "I have called this meeting to address the classification of your world." Olivia stepped forward. "Supreme Leader, on behalf of humanity, I again extend our sincere apologies for the incident. It was never our intention to cause harm." Vraxthul raised one of his 4 hands. "The military investigation has confirmed it was indeed an accident. No charges will be filed against your delegation." The humans exchanged relieved glances. "However," Vraxthul continued, "this incident has revealed a serious flaw in our classification system, a system that has remained unchanged for 12 generations." The other council members shifted uncomfortably. One of them leaned forward. "Supreme Leader, surely one incident doesn't invalidate our entire approach." "Doesn't it?" Vraxthul countered. "Our system assumes that physical size and strength determine evolutionary success. Yet a creature smaller than my eye nearly ended my life, and would have succeeded if not for the human's knowledge." Greg stepped forward, unable to contain his scientific enthusiasm. "Supreme Leader, if I may, the Sydney funnel web spider represents just one of Earth's many evolutionary paths. We have millions of species, each adapted to its own niche in ways that don't always prioritize size." Vraxthul turned his compound eyes to Greg. "Dr. Summers, I would like you to explain this concept to the Council more fully." Greg nodded eagerly and activated his tablet, projecting images of Earth's diverse wildlife. On Earth, creatures evolved to fill every possible habitat and role. Some became large predators, yes, but others became small and developed different advantages: speed, camouflage, venom, or specialized anatomy. He showed images of electric eels, poison dart frogs, box jellyfish, and other small but deadly creatures. "Some of Earth's most efficient predators are among our smallest," Greg explained. "Dragonflies catch nearly 95% of their targets, making them more successful hunters than lions or sharks." The council members watched with growing interest, their earlier dismissal replaced by cautious attention. "And you believe this diversity is a strength, not a weakness?" one council member asked. "Absolutely," Greg replied. "It's allowed life on Earth to survive multiple mass extinction events. When conditions change and large creatures die off, smaller, more adaptable ones often survive to evolve into new forms." Vraxthul clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "I have been reviewing Dr. Summers' research while recovering. Earth's biological approach differs fundamentally from our own. On Zrithia, competition drove evolution toward ever larger, stronger forms. On Earth, Adaptation drove evolution toward specialized forms of all sizes. He turned to address the full council. I propose that our classification system must be updated. Size and physical strength alone cannot be the primary metrics of evolutionary success or civilization potential. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some Zrith officials seemed resistant to the idea, while others nodded in agreement. "What do you suggest, Supreme Leader?" asked the eldest council member. "I propose that Earth be reclassified as a category. One civilization," Vraxthul announced. The chamber erupted in clicking sounds of surprise and protest. Category 1 was the highest possible classification, reserved for the most advanced and powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Not because of their technology, Vraxthul clarified, raising his voice above the commotion, but because of their biological diversity and the defensive capabilities their planet has naturally developed. Any species that could evolve creatures capable of killing a Zrith with a single bite deserves our highest respect and caution. Olivia stepped forward again. "Supreme Leader, while we appreciate the recognition, we hope this new classification can lead to cooperation rather than fear between our peoples." Vraxthul's translator conveyed what seemed like a chuckle. "Indeed, Commander Winters, fear and respect are different things. I respect what your world has produced, and I believe we have much to learn from each other." He turned to address a group of Zrith scientists who stood nearby. "I am establishing a new joint research initiative between our worlds focused on studying Earth's venomous species for medical applications. With the humans' permission, of course." Greg could barely contain his excitement. "We would be honored to participate in such research, Supreme Leader." The formal reclassification ceremony proceeded, with Earth officially designated as a Category 1 civilization. The earlier draft of the treaty was replaced with a new document that established equal trade rights, mutual defense agreements, and cultural exchange programs. As the ceremony concluded, Krazats approached the human delegation. "I must apologize for my earlier behavior," the diplomat said. "I was as guilty as any of underestimating your world based on appearances." "It's a common mistake," Olivia replied with a smile. "Even humans do it sometimes." Later, as the humans prepared to return to Earth, they gathered in their quarters to reflect on what had happened. "So a tiny spider just changed humanity's place in the galaxy," Ben said, shaking his head in amazement. Sam, who had been quiet throughout much of the proceedings, smiled shyly. "I never thought my mistake would end up helping Earth." Greg patted the young officer's shoulder. "Sometimes accidents lead to the greatest discoveries. Though maybe next time we'll be more careful with our specimen containers." Olivia looked out at the alien cityscape. "What happens when we get home? How do we explain to world leaders that we're now considered equals with one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy because a spider bit their leader?" "We tell them the truth," Greg said simply, "that after all our technological achievements, it was Earth's natural diversity that earned us respect among the stars." The next day, as they boarded the Zrith ship that would return them to Earth, Supreme Leader Vraxthul himself came to see them off. He moved more slowly than before, still recovering from the venom's effects. "Commander Winters," he said to Olivia, "when you return to Earth, please convey to your leaders that the Zrith look forward to a long and productive relationship between our worlds." "I will, Supreme Leader," Olivia promised. Vraxthul turned to Greg. "Dr. Summers, I have a gift for you." He handed Greg a small, ornate container. Inside was the Sydney funnel web spider, alive and well in a carefully constructed habitat. "Our scientists made a detailed study of this remarkable creature and created a proper environment for it," Vraxthul explained. "I believe it should return home with you." Greg accepted the container with surprise. "Thank you, Supreme Leader. I'll make sure it's properly cared for." As the humans boarded their transport, Vraxthul had one final comment. "We have much to learn from each other, humans, but perhaps the most important lesson has already been learned." "What's that?" Olivia asked. "That greatness comes in all sizes," Vraxthul replied, his compound eyes fixed on the tiny spider in its container. "And that underestimating even the smallest creature can be a deadly mistake." As the ship lifted off from the Zrith homeworld, The human delegation looked out at the massive alien cities below. They were returning to Earth not as representatives of a developing world in need of protection, but as equals to one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. And it was all thanks to a small spider that had traveled farther than any arachnid before it and changed humanity's future among the stars.